Aloha Mavericks from all around the world. My name's Mike Kelly and I'm super excited to bring you yet another episode of Unmapped, a podcast exploring the world through the eyes of remarkable humans on extraordinary journeys. I hang out with pioneers, adventurers and trailblazers from around the planet, hearing their stories and unlocking the lessons learned from a life on and off the beaten path. And just a little bit of housekeeping, if you're enjoying the show, please consider sharing it with your friends, following and reviewing us wherever you listen to it, and check us out on Instagram at UnmappedPod. It would mean the absolute world, and I guess you get to come and hang out, which could be fun. All right, let's get into the show. On this episode of Unmapped, we're speaking with Jess Walker. Jess is such an inspiring human being and a really good friend of mine. I've been so excited to have this conversation and release it for a while because I've always been so fascinated with who she is and what makes her tick. And I've actually been saving parts of this conversation from talking about it in real life because I wanted to be able to share it, because I just think Jess has so much to give and offer in the way that she thinks and operates as a human being. She started a business at 22, exited it at 25, which is so impressive. I mean, ask anyone who's had a startup, just getting one off the ground, let alone finding someone to buy it, is a serious journey. She's on the board of Fishburners and she helped set up a VC, Black Nova, and is currently the community manager at AirTree. I have been so excited to present this conversation to you all. So without any further ado, let's get into this. Please enjoy this conversation with Jess Walker. Jess, hello and welcome to Unmapped. It is so nice to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Mikey.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm really excited for this one because I've realized that we've been good friends for a while, kind of like good personal friends for a couple of years now, but I've never really sat down and asked you about who you really are as a person and what makes you tick. And you clearly beat to your own drum. So I'm really excited to get into that today. But I think we'll start off with something nice and easy. You're from across the Dutch. You're a Kiwi. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your starting in, I guess, like you're starting in startups in New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. So correct. You'll hear my accent go funny when I say 7 and accent. But I have neutralized my accent over the last 7 years of living in Australia. So I started out in startups when I was probably it depends what you classify as a startup. I've always wanted to build something and grow something and figure out how business worked. And so when I was 10, I was the old standard selling chocolate bars on the bus and making a profit because those chocolate bars were almost about to go off and buy milk. And then I was like, oh, supply and demand. Oh, kids want a chocolate bar. I can sell it for $4. Wow, this is wild. And then throughout high school and university, I would do a bunch of pretty crappy e-commerce brands that I just kind of bought something, branded it, sold it, figured out how that worked, figured out how to build a website. And then they were all just kind of fun to do and fun to learn. And, YouTube and Google was my best friend at the time. And then when I was 22, I started my first, proper company called Idle. It was an Airbnb short-term rental management platform marketplace. It was one of the early ones doing purely Airbnb in New Zealand. It was back in 2015, 2016. And I kind of just started it because I wanted to learn how to build a bigger business. I wanted to learn all the ropes of how to actually set up business and what that meant. And just kind of didn't have anyone to learn from at the time. I didn't have any mentors. And so a lot of it was trial and error, lots of failing, lots of stumbling, but somehow managed to run it for 3 years and then sell it to a company in the UK. And I didn't even know what startups or VC or bootstrapping meant. But now what I know is I was a solo founder bootstrapping a business for 3 years, which was acquired. And so now I just put all those fancy code words in there. But that was an incredible experience into what it was like to be a founder. But back then the New Zealand and Auckland startup ecosystem was very nascent. It was very, there were like a few VCs, a few founders. There weren't heaps of groups or places or co-working spaces that you could go and learn and kind of be surrounded by other founders. And so that was a really interesting journey. And as soon as I sold that, I moved to Australia and kind of said, I want to do this again, but I want to do it in Australia where I know the ecosystem is a bit more advanced, I guess, than New Zealand. And so moved to Australia 7 years ago and basically joined Fishburners the very first day I arrived and made a group of friends and tried to build another business and failed miserably at that, and then got into VC side, and that's where I am now. So I've been in VC for the last 3 years. I started out in Black Nova VC, which is it was a team of 4 or 5 of us, and we were building the very first fund. We raised $30 million, and that was an incredible experience to understand what it was like to actually create a fund from scratch and to fundraise and look after founders and look after the brand and the community. And that was incredible. And then for the last year, I've been at AirTree, which is one of the larger funds here in Australia. And we invested in companies all across Australia and New Zealand, and it's just wonderful.
That was an amazing synopsis. Thank you for sharing that. Pretty well like kind of your entire adult kind of like professional career in literally under 4 minutes. Well done. Despite the adult, actually not even professional adult career, like you started as a 10-year-old in that story. Let's go back to 10-year-old Jess. I was not someone who was selling chocolate bars on the bus. I was not your natural kind of, I suppose, entrepreneur. And so I'm really curious, was it something that was instilled in you from family or what kind of trait, so what kind of trait do you think it is that you just inherently had in you that got you going on that kind of path from such an early age? And do you, I mean, it's a long time ago, but do you remember the time when you had the light bulb moment of, oh, I could like have money to buy things that I want, like without needing pocket money from my parents. And I could do that by like providing supply and demand chocolate bars to kids on the bus. Like it's do you remember that light bulb click moment?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I can now pinpoint like who the people in my life were that I was inspired by to, I guess, do business. My mum, like when we were little, my mum was a solo mum, and we would go to like her aerobics classes that she ran, or we'd go to work with her, and she like did that herself, and she built all these things herself. And so I learned, I guess, by seeing her do it, I learned how she was doing it, and I was just like, I want to do that one day. I don't know what it is, but I want to be my own boss and I want to do that. And so the chocolate bar thing my brother and I were doing, he's 2 years older than me, and there was a store called Ike's Emporium, and they always sold those chocolate bars that were about to go off in like bulk. And so we're like, let's just try it out. And then we did. And then like that, we were on the bus and like we sold out the whole box. And like the first day we were on the bus. And then the second day kids were like, where are the chocolate bars? And so that was like, oh, give the people what they want and they'll give you money. And it's bizarre. But yeah, it was wonderful. I remember I saved my money and my brother bought a electric remote control car. So yeah, he was more fun than I was.
What did you spend your money on eventually? What did it get saved for?
I think, honestly, it was pretty boring. Every time I would get money, I think I saved it and then ended up like learning how to invest, but in like little stocks or, you know, whatever my parents would teach me how to do. And they were by no means experts, but we were just like trying to figure it out. And so, yeah.
That's pretty cool. I love the part of the story where the kids are on the bus the next day going like, yo, like, come on, like, this is your job now. You got to bring the supply. Come on, guys.
Yeah, exactly. At least no one started competing with us.
You talk about your business Idle, which how old were you when you started Idle? Were you a teenager or early 20s?
So I was 22 when I started it, and then 25 when I exited it.
I want to talk about the exit, because for someone who was not aware of really what they were doing, that's
Correct.
A pretty massive accomplishment to
have, kind of like, you know what I mean? Like flying by the seat of your pants, sort of like figuring it all out as you went, didn't really understand like what you're doing in sort of startup terms. Having an exit at 25 is pretty cool. And also to be able to build a business from, like origin to exit in 3 years is also something that just doesn't happen very often. I mean, it probably wasn't like a $1 billion exit, but like it's sort of, like it's a pretty amazing experience. I mean, if it was, congratulations, you'd probably be the only person from the New Zealand market that managed to sell a product to 4 million people that managed to exit as a unicorn in 3 years. Yeah. But how did you find that process of exiting the business?
It was you're completely right when you say I didn't really know what I was doing. And spent most of the startup Googling how to do things and just reading blogs, articles, and learning from other people. I'd spent the 3 years of building it kind of not being taken seriously by many, many people. And as a young blonde female, people would say, "Oh, how's your little side project?" Or how's dad funding the business? I'm like, I don't know what bootstrapping is, but that's what I'm doing by myself. And I spent a lot of it fairly frustrated with the way I think women are often underestimated in this space. And so when it came to selling it, I again Googled how to sell a business, and a few brokers came up. And so I called the brokers and was talking about the business and what I wanted to do and what I wanted to sell. And they said, "Yep, great. We can work with you. We can introduce you to the right people." And then I think the flat fee was like $50K just to make the introductions. And I guess naive and also stubborn me at the time was like, "No, I'll just try it myself because that's what I've done the whole time anyway." And so I ended up messaging about 15 people on LinkedIn. I went on LinkedIn and found like the CEOs of all these companies that I thought might want to buy Idle. And they were CEOs of like real estate firms and other holiday rental marketplaces. Messaged 15 people. I had about 300 characters to use. And so it was like, "Hey, Michael, I have this business. I've built it to this. I want to sell it for this. Are you interested?" And that was kind of my 300 characters. And of the 15, I think about 8 people came back and said, "Let's talk." And so I was like, that's not bad for cold messaging.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, wow, this is good. And then from those 8, I actually ended up having like lawyer conversations, contract conversations with about 5 of them. And
also that was very good.
Oh yeah, it was a fascinating process. It was I had a really good lawyer, but one time he couldn't make it to one of our meetings, and I was talking to the CEO and the CFO of one of New Zealand's largest real estate firms, and we were sitting in the boardroom, and they were probably late 50s, white men, comb-overs, and I was 25-year-old little blonde me, and we're sitting in the boardroom, and we had already talked about numbers and what was going to happen, and the plan was they'd buy it and then I'd stay on for a bit and help them grow across the country. And the CFO looked at me and he's contemplating something in his mind, and he was like, "I'm going to be a little bit un-PC." And I was like, "Okay, here we go. What are you going to say?"
Oh no, where's this going?
What shit are you going to say this time? And he said, "Are you going to have kids anytime soon? Because we just can't have that." And he was basically saying the whole deal is off if you want to have children.
What?
And I was like, fuming. Because if I was a man, that would never, ever, ever have been asked. And they wouldn't have cared if I was going to have a child. And so I just said, "No, I don't want kids anytime soon." But then I was fuming inside. And I was like,
yeah.
And so I said back, I was like, there was the real estate brochure in the middle of the table, and I opened up to the board of directors page, and it was all middle-aged white men with comb-overs and not one other piece of diversity there. And I looked at them and I said, "Can I be a little bit un-PC now?" And I don't think he'd ever been talked back to in his entire life. And I was like, "You don't really tick the diversity box, do you?" And he just looked at me like, "You little bitch." And it was so satisfying. And then I was like, "I think we're done here. Good day." And then I left, and then I went out and I called my mom and I was like, "So I'm not selling to these guys." Yeah. It was very satisfying and very scary. But it was just
God.
Like those years of like not being taken seriously and just like not being treated like a business person. So yeah, didn't sell to them, but I did end up selling to this wonderful company in the UK. And they were young and hungry and growing and like just wanted to just expand across the world. And I remember we had a few conversations like before Christmas. We had one on Christmas Eve, one on Boxing Day, and then on New Year's Day, the money was in my account. I was like, whoa, this is wild.
Wow.
That was bizarre. So it was really fun. It was definitely a huge learning curve. But looking back now, and I've actually asked a few people who have done it properly and who have like sold actual billion-dollar companies and done really well. And the process was similar. They had like the KPMGs of the world to help them with their numbers and audits and stuff. So very different. But like the actual like find a buyer, do the contracts, sell the company. It was interesting. So maybe I'll do it again one day, but probably.
So, firstly, well done for the two fingers to the old white dudes. I think that is just. Can I be a little bit un-PC now as well? That's so good. Oh man, I bet that felt so satisfying, and also like just also I mean it. Like, I mean, it's good that it's, I mean, hopefully you wouldn't have that experience. I mean, you probably would in different parts of the world still have that experience. I mean, hopefully you wouldn't have that experience in kind of like the places where we work and operate now. So hopefully it feels like it is changing a little bit. It would depend on the industry too. Like real estate is not a great industry for stuff like that.
Yeah, that's very true. No.
I tell you what, though, the world learnt a very valuable lesson via those two men, and it is to not underestimate Jessica Walker. That is for sure. Where was I going to go? So I wanted to ask a kind of like a double-edged sword question, but are you glad that you did it the way that you did it? Are you kind of going no to the broker, I don't need you, and then going through your own process, but at the same time, So are you happy that you did that the way you did it for your first time because it allowed you to learn through the process? And if you would, and now that you've done it once, what would you do differently next time?
I often think about that, and I often think like I was naive and stubborn when I was selling the business because of all of the like not being taken seriously, being taken advantage of, kind of not. I wasn't seen as the same level playing field, and you know what? Fine. Like I didn't have much experience, but I was still selling a business, and like to at least have like been treated with the respect of doing that, I think was missing, and I think that was probably a lot of it was coming from me as well because I was inexperienced. Now, I think I've earned the right to play, and so I think I wouldn't be so defensive, if that's the right term. And like imagine if I went for a broker and they 10x what I would have got, who knows? But imagine if I went with a broker and they took half of my money because whatever, like, you know. So yeah, I don't know. I think it was because I was so unsure of what I was doing. I did it the way I did. I think if I did it again, and if I was fortunate enough to build a company that wanted to be sold, I would go through like PwC or KPMG or one of the consulting firms to like do it properly.
Yeah. Okay. But it's, I suppose like in the next business that you end up building one day, that's what you would do differently. And I suppose what I'm hearing from you is that I think you're happy that you did it the way you did it for your first time because it was a good experience to have gone through, or maybe you feel like you were a little bit just like you use the word naive about the process in terms of the first one.
Yeah, I think I was happy the way it went because it went on my terms, but like who am I to say it went the right way because I don't know what the right way is. But in saying that, I think when there's two things with being surrounded by people who tell you what to do and like can support you and help you. It's wonderful because they've done the path, they've been there and they know how to do it. But that's just one way of doing something. Because I didn't have anyone to be like, hey, this is the exact way that you should do it. I did it a different way. It's not the wrong way. It's a different way. But it was, I don't know, it was a great learning curve. I probably I'd do it. I don't know the answer to that. It's a tough one. I always think about it and I'm like, maybe I should have done it. Maybe I shouldn't have done it.
Fair enough. I mean, either way, I think that you probably got, either way, regardless of what the financial conclusion would have been, if you used a broker or you'd done this or you'd done that, you probably got a lot of experience doing it the way that you did it, which is always a net positive, right?
Yeah.
So after you exit that business, you come to Australia, and that was a conscious decision to come to Australia because you wanted to be a part of I guess, a bigger and maybe a more developed ecosystem. Like, what was the primary reason for the move to be a part of a startup ecosystem?
There was two parts. So my partner at the time was living here, I believe. Yes. And so I moved here to be with him. But from my point of view, like, I wasn't going to move until I had done what I needed to do with the business in New Zealand. And then Australia was like, I compare it to moving from Auckland's ecosystem to Sydney's is like moving from Sydney's to San Fran's. And so it was bigger and more exciting and more opportunity and more people and more education. And so, yeah, I was very, very happy to move to Australia to continue figuring out what I wanted to do next. And I went straight into like research mode of what's the next business? What am I going to do? What am I going to build? And I bought a notebook. I've had the same notebook for many, many years. And every time someone would complain or would say something, oh, I wish this existed, I'd like write it down and be like, tell me more about this annoying thing that's happening to you and why is it annoying you? And like, tell me more. And that's how I started the second business, which was a fintech for children.
Wonderful.
It was
I don't know if you want the name. Wonderfun. Yay. I remember Wonderfun.
Yeah. It was such a lovely journey until it certainly wasn't. Do you want to go into that one?
I remember, I mean, you can go into it if you want. I'm pretty sure I remember what happened, and it wasn't pretty.
It was not pretty. Yeah, I mean, we can touch on it. So yeah, it was a investment platform for kids. I started it, I can't remember what year it was, but basically the idea was instead of a child getting a toy every birthday, Christmas, celebration, whatever it is from everyone that loves the kid, they instead put $50, say, into their Wonder Fund, which is invested over the first 21 years of their life, compounding annually. And then when they turn 21, they have $100,000 to start adulthood with, rather than landfill filling up with crappy toys. I was building it for about 8, 9, maybe 10 months. And then I brought on a co-founder and we went 50-50, which may have been my first mistake. I don't know. And we were working on it for a while together. And then I had some family stuff happen back in New Zealand. So I had to fly back to New Zealand through COVID. And I was like, for 3 weeks, I was pretty inundated with this family thing that happened. And while it happened, my co-founder, the week before it happened, he called me and was like, I want more equity or I want out. I was like, wait, we're 50-50. I've been doing this for a year longer than you, dude. Like, what's happening? And then when I was inundated with this grief thing, he stole everything. He took the designer and developer who he hired, which another mistake was letting your co-founder hire people that they know, which you just need to trust your co-founder, right? And you need to go all in. But
I actually don't think that's a mistake. I think if you're starting a business with someone and you don't trust them to bring on people that they think are good people, then that would be. I actually don't think that was a mistake.
Yeah, and another really interesting mistake, or not mistake, but learning was we'd signed like a co-founders agreement, which isn't legally binding, but it's like a handshake. And we were about to sign the shareholders agreement, and we hadn't done that yet. And that's when he stole everything. When I was like, I couldn't do anything for this 3-week period while I was in New Zealand. And he took, designer, developer, took all the code, took everything, rebranded it to a new company, and then put it online and started competing all in 3 weeks. And I was so broken at this personal thing that was going on that I couldn't like physically handle any of it. And so my partner at the time was like, you need to go to court, you need to take him to lawyers, blah, blah. And I was just like a broken human being at the time. So sent him a cease and desist. He ended up having to stop doing what he was doing and tried to then be reasonable and try to, like, I don't know, say that he could run it without me. I don't know. But now Wonder Fund is dead in the water. So if anyone wants to run a company called Wonder Fund, I have the URLs. You can buy it.
See,
there we go. This is the next business I'm telling. It's a shell of one.
I remember being on the phone to you through that process, actually, when you were over in New Zealand. Yeah, that was a tough time for you. However, you did make it onto bigger and better things, or at least back to happiness and kind of moving on. And you were at Black Nova at the time, weren't you? And then you've since moved over to AirTree. Just walk me through your VC journey, and then what I want to do following from that is just talk about it in comparison to Entrepreneur, and then also you're on the board of Fishburners, but we'll get there. Just walk me through sort of what was it like being in a very small VC raising a fund. That's pretty cool. Like, not many people get to like be in the origin team almost of the first fund of a VC. That must have been a pretty special experience. What's something that you learned from that you don't feel like you would have learned from many other experiences that you would get to have in life? And then talk to me about flipping over into AirTree.
Yeah. You're right. Like, my first foray into VC with Black Nova was phenomenal. I was very lucky to work with Matt, Darcy, Jamie, and Thomas, and they were just a group of very, very intelligent people that were trying to build something, and to be able to be at the table when they were talking about like working with the lawyers and working with the fund manager and working like all these right people to like finalize minute details of why we're doing this and how we're doing this and what the value prop is and who we're going to go invest in and how we're going to get investment. And the real technical detail around actually building a fund. Like, it is pretty difficult to build a fund. And it is very much similar to starting a company, like a startup. It's the same headaches, the same like ups and downs of like, as a VC, you're raising money. It's like a startup, you're raising money. And you go to high net worth individuals and you ask them for money, and a lot of them say no. And then you get a little bit, and then you get a little bit, and then you get more credibility. And just being there for that first stage and seeing just how difficult it is to build a fund was pretty eye-opening, because you look at funds like the big ones, like AirTree, for example, they raised $700 million in 3 months. Like, that is insane. But that's their fourth, I think, fund. Whereas the very, very first one was going to be just as tough as the first one at Black Nova. And so, yeah, seeing that from the inside was a very, very fortunate position. And yeah, I don't know, maybe one day. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe one day. Maybe one day you'd get back in that snake pit.
yeah, exactly. Maybe one day. But yeah, it was phenomenal. And then being in such a small fund at the time, I was able to learn every aspect of it and to work in every aspect of it, which I think is a very valuable and rare experience, because when you're somewhere like AirTree, you have one job and there's 40 people. Whereas when you're somewhere like Black Nova, it's one job across all parts of the company. And then, yeah, so moving to AirTree, it was almost like, it was a strange experience because it was such a small, tight-knit group to a larger community, a larger company. And it was like going from a startup to a scale-up. And lovely to have a job where I could focus on one thing and do that really well. Even though I like to have my fingers in many pies. And so, yeah, at AirTree, I look after the Explorer program and the AirTree community. And so that's teaching people how to be angel investors all across Australia and New Zealand. And then I run a community for women and non-binary founders, entrepreneurs, startup enthusiasts in Australia and New Zealand as well. So it's a very, very fulfilling role of you go to work, you help and support people in different areas. It's really satisfying.
Yeah. I mean, AirTree, for people that aren't in the startup ecosystem, and if you are in the startup ecosystem, then you would know AirTree. If not, an AirTree, you would probably say in the top 2 or 3, probably top 2. I mean, along with Blackbird, the It's probably the biggest players in the Oz VC or the AUNZ, I'd say VC scene do, like amazing work, really foundational to the ecosystem, and the stuff that you're doing is also really, really cool. So it's it's been pretty cool to watch you in the role that you're in now. You're also on the board of Fishburners, which is where you landed day one of your move to Sydney. So that's a nice little full circle moment. You're on the board. You've been on the board for what, 18? I think I remember you telling me this about 18 months ago. I mean, that's again, like we're talking like, I mean, that's a big step up at the age that you stepped up into that role. And it also put you in a position where you have exited a business, worked in VC, and a board director of like a broader startup ecosystem sort of organization. Very broad, like you kind of tap in like every kind of facet of the startup ecosystem and what it means to be a founder, or what it means to, be involved in this in starting businesses. What do you feel like? Okay, so let's go Fishburners first. Tell me what the experience has been like to sit on a board. Is that your first board?
Yes. Yeah, first board. It has been a very, very interesting experience. Like you say, like from a founder point of view, you're in the weeds, you're getting stuck in, and every day is like, what's going to happen? And it's very operational and exciting. And then from a VC point of view, you get to see all that happen, and you get to talk to these cool founders and talk to these amazing investors, but you're not necessarily in the weeds there. And it's kind of similar to a board position. So the very first thing I was taught when I was in the board was nose in, hands out. So like be curious about what's happening and be interested in what's happening with the company and how it's going, and look at the strategy and stuff, but don't touch. And that's really hard to do when you're like such a toucher. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you want to be like, oh, this is a great idea, let's do this. And it's like, wait, strategy, high level, take a step back and look at like the next 10 years. And so when I first joined Fishburners, it's a co-working space in Sydney, and it's mainly for early stage startups. And it was bang on COVID. And so it was tough. Like we went from really doing well and having almost like a full capacity of desks to COVID not allowing anybody into the building. And so navigating that and supporting the CEO through that and making sure that we survived was kind of jumping right in the deep end. And even some of the other board members were like, you joined at an interesting time. This is tough. But fast forward 18 months, we've hired a new CEO, and he's phenomenal. He was a founder before, a successful founder before. He built a pretty incredible company, and kind of is very empathetic to other founders and knows how to grow and think about other revenue streams and really like take Fishburners to the next level. And so it's a really exciting time to now be on the board and see it through a kind of new phase of its life. But yeah, huge learning curves. And the thing that you don't really know until you get into it is like the governance side of things. And that's the opposite of what you're kind of doing when you're a founder, would have the vision and the idea and the growth, and that's exciting. And then the governance of the board is like very different. They're very different.
Has there ever been a time in your career where you're not putting yourself through a steep learning curve?
I don't think so. I like to, I have a quote, which I live by. It's do something every day that scares you, by Eleanor Roosevelt. And like, if I'm not doing something that's scary, then I don't think I'm learning. And so that's kind of one of the things I go by every day. And so like, what was it? Maybe last year I was like, okay, what's something that really scares the shit out of me? And at the time, public speaking, I was terrified. I do it a lot because that was part of what I did, but I absolutely hated it with a passion. Like I'd like get all like the physiological like breathing and the nerves and everything. And so I was like, okay, well, that terrifies me. And so I signed up for a 3-month stand-up comedy course to like learn how to do stand-up comedy and try and get over my fear of public speaking. And it worked really well. So I'd highly recommend it. But like, what's worse than standing up and people laughing at you is when they don't laugh at you when you want them to laugh at you. It's like,
yeah.
And so I think the biggest thing I learned from that was always have a plan B, and like things are not going to go right when you do public speaking, and things are not going to go right all the time, and just being able to not take it so seriously and everything's going to be fine in the end. It's like, yeah. But yeah, do something every day that scares you.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely got the "don't take it so seriously" part when you brought the air horn to South Star. That was probably a product of that course, and everyone at South Star knew it. Tell me, so it might be this time, but it might be this time with this fear. But tell me about the time when you feel like you've been most scared, worked through it, and then done something and faced that fear and gone, "Oh my God, that feels." Well, I don't know how it felt, but tell me about the time you've been scared, done something in the face of that fear, and how it felt in the aftermath.
Good question. Oh, when I was doing the first Business Idol,
not the selling chocolates. That one.
That was not scary. That was fun. I would eat my product as well. When I was doing Idol. So basically, what happened was, I had built the business. I like built the website, built all the marketing channels around it, and had maybe one customer. And I was working full time still whilst working at Idol, and I was meant to be flying down to Wellington, Auckland to Wellington, for an event that I was running. And for some reason, somehow my website and my business got out to the media, that because there was the Lions rugby tour coming to New Zealand and they were looking for more accommodation, and they were like, "Oh, here's this Idol company. Let's go find the founder or whoever and talk to them." And so just before my flight, one of the top radio people in New Zealand called me and was like, "Hey, Jess, this is whatever his name is, Tony Beach. We're doing a piece on accommodation, blah, blah, blah. Are you interested in doing an interview? Or is your ops or sales manager interested in doing an interview?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure thing. I'll get my ops manager to give you a call." And so I called my boyfriend at the time and I was like, "Sam, I need you to be my ops manager and I need you to do an interview for Idol. People want to talk to us. I don't know why, but they want to talk to us." And so we went through like all these questions that they may ask us. At the end, he was like, "No, you have to call him back and you have to do the interview." And so this was terrifying. I didn't know what I was doing. And I call him back and I was like, "Oh yeah, everyone's busy, so I'll do the interview." And he said, "Okay, great. What do we call you?" And I was like, "Jess." He's like, "Yeah, what's your title?" And I was like, "Founder? Imposter? I don't know." Like, and so we did the radio interview, and then it aired the next day just before my flight. And as it aired, I think he knew I was a new business person or something, but he gave out my email and my phone number on air when it was recording. And I was on the plane about to take off to Wellington, and my website went down because the traffic was too high. My phone kept going off, my emails will keep pinging, and then we went off, and I was like, "Holy shit, what's happening?" And I landed to like hundreds of emails of people wanting to put their properties on Idol, and I was like, and I called my mum again, and I was like, oh my God. And so that day I did the event, and then the next morning at 5 a.m., 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. I had 3 back-to-back interviews with other radio people for some reason. Whoa. And then I went home and I like crawled up into a ball because I was so exhausted and so tired and like wonderfully just overwhelmed. And then I had to call my boss and quit that day as well, because I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And yeah, so that was absolutely terrifying, but it kind of propelled the business from one customer to hundreds of customers in the space of 48 hours. And yeah, I remember just like rocking back and forth like, oh, this is a lot. 22-year-old me is not prepared for this. It was great.
Wow.
It was really good. Yeah. So that was fun.
What was the number one thing that you did well? And I want to move on from this in a sec to a little bit of stuff around your mindset. But what was the number one thing that you think you did well in the aftermath of that to manage it?
I had wonderful people around me to support me, because like it was definitely a sink or swim moment of either you get onto it and you get all these people and you convert them to customers and you build the business and you grow and you do all these fun things and that's amazing, or you are completely overwhelmed by it and you just stop. And so I had like my mum, my partner, his mum, one of my other friends who just happened to not be working at the time, and I brought them all over to the house and I was like, all right, we've got all these emails to do, we've got all these things to do, let's do it. And like I was just so lucky to have such wonderful support. And I guess, yeah, just having the right people around me was very, very fortunate. And then not do well, but did a lot of was just put in all of the hours to my body and mind's detriment, but got it done.
Sometimes you've got to,
yeah. And those times, like I don't agree with like really burning yourself out, but like when that happens and you have the opportunity, you're not going to be like, I'm going to go to bed now.
Small sprints, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes in life, you've just got to hit the track and sprint 800 meters at the pace you'd normally run 100, and just like it just happens, and then you can take a break. The problem is when you're then running an entire marathon like a sprint, and that probably is more like what it was, right?
Yeah.
Back to the entrepreneur versus VC versus board director. At your heart, which are you?
I'm a founder. No, I yeah. I like to create things. I like to go from 0 to 1 and build things, and yeah, I love what I'm doing now.
You get to do that though. You also get to do that in the roles that you do. So,
Exactly. That's why I love what I'm doing, because I get to create and support people, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But I think I'll definitely build something again one day, whether that's a startup or a fund or who knows. It's happening though.
So that brings me to, this is kind of where I want to spend a little bit of time before we close this out. Like, what drives you? Like, you're talking about you build something one day. It might be a fund, might be this, might be that. But I have always found you've always beat to your own drum. You turn up at the things that we all do as a friendship group when you can or when you want to, and you go home when you need to, and you've always seemed like someone who really understands their guiding principles and the values by which they live their life. It's actually quite inspiring. And so I just like what is your North Star? I'm so curious. I've been saving this question for the podcast because I didn't want to know the answer until I got it from you on it.
What is my North Star? You know how this is probably many people have heard this before, but like the hyphen between the date you were born and the date you die, and that's all that really matters. And so like, what is that hyphen? What do you do in that hyphen? Who do you impact? Who do you help? What do you create? What have you done? And I think about that, and one of my friends passed away, and I was like, what do I want to be known for? Who do I like? We all have an opportunity to do something incredible on this planet, and whether that's create a family and have a lovely life, or it's like impact as many people as possible, or what is it? I think about that all the time. Like, how am I going to impact people, and in what way? Like, well, what's it going to be? And so I think my North Star, it used to be so silly. It used to be like, I want to build a unicorn, but why? Like, why? What is the point of building a unicorn? Yeah, like, yeah, let's just do it. It's like, okay, well, why though? Like, who's it going to help? Is it just for yourself? Is it just for like the glory of building a unicorn that you're going to be happy then? But now it's, how many people can I impact? And I have like a weird way of getting about it. Like, I think that, so like maybe I'll be a full-time investor one day, but you need money. You need lots of money, and so you need to build a business first to make the money to invest in other companies and support them. And so I have a wiggly path that I'm kind of trying to follow, but yeah, that I guess that's what motivates me. How and who am I going to impact the most?
How do you stay on that? How do you know, it's all well and good to have the North Star and have the wiggly path, but it doesn't always, it requires a real discipline to be able to, I mean, and at least the way that I've watched you as kind of like a person in your, I guess, like close friendship group over the last couple of years is I see someone who is very disciplined and very focused on maximizing the things that they really enjoy or want to achieve in their life. And so, you know, whether that be running like literally the best 30th that like the world has ever seen, or whether it be, you know, like kind of ensuring that you're doing everything you need to do in your personal life to maximize what you can do in your professional life and things like that. Like you always seem to be really focused on doing the things that you really want to achieve. Like does the going, I mean, I assume the going has to get tough for you sometimes, right? It doesn't seem like it does because it seems like you're always making the right decisions, but I assume it does. And when the going gets tough, like what is that like for you and what do you do?
Yeah, it definitely gets tough and it's very frustrating sometimes. And it's exhausting. Like it's that burnout thing. Like for example, I have like a side hustle business, whatever you call it, e-com thing. And I work a not demanding, but like fairly demanding job. And it's fairly long hours sometimes. But I still want to do the side thing. And so whether that's waking up at 5 a.m. and doing an extra hour, which it seems ridiculous, but sometimes it just is the most quiet time of day because no one's talking to you, or staying up late to do it or whatever it is. I think I don't know if I've got a wonderful answer for this, but it's like I get fixated on something. If I want to do something, I do it and I just continue to do it until that thing is done, until I've reached the goal. And sometimes it's really stubborn and sometimes you have to just put in the hours and just do it. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's a terrible answer.
Shia LaBeouf. No, it's not. It's commitment, consistency, and discipline. Is what I heard.
There's definitely times, like for example, I was recently studying for an exam, and it's an exam to try and get into a school, and it's like 6 to 6 months of studying to do an exam to then have a very, 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 very small possibility of even getting into a school. And like 30% of the way, and I'm like, why am I doing this? This is a stupid idea. This is so much effort and time and like exhaustingly painful problems that are hard to solve. And like I could be hanging out with my friends, or I could be, you know, doing funner stuff than studying all the time, but I'm studying all the time. And there's so many times where I've like wanted to give up and just be like, nah, screw it, let's do something else. But then there's also that sunk cost fallacy where I've already sunk 4 months of my time into this. I may as well just finish it. And so that's tough. Like when you have to continue going, and like it's like this little thing in the back of my mind. It's like, if you don't do it, you're never going to get there. But if you do it, you have a 10% possibility of getting there. And so just get it done. And in the past, when that's been the case, it's often worked out well. And I think it's that like just continuing. And I think when you talk to founders and you hear and see the ones that have done really well, they're extremely resilient and determined. I think determination is one of the key characteristics of a strong founder, because you just have to keep going. When the going gets really hard, and it does, and it's like you just want to give up, that's when it like the great founders emerge.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Last question, Jess. And I do steal this one from Tim Ferriss every now and again when I just really want to know the answer to it.
Okay, what is Tim Ferriss ask?
His guests too. It's the one he closes out with as well. So I've literally stolen it word for word and at the same point of an interview.
Can you say in his accent too?
No, I don't think so. There's a billboard. I don't know. You might have heard this one. There's a billboard that you know that every single person on the planet is going to drive past in the morning on their Monday morning. And you have been asked by someone to put something on that billboard. What does it say? Fucking great question, isn't it?
This is a goodie. What do I want everyone in the world to do or be or think? It would probably be, what are you going to do for someone else today? And then turn it to some sort of campaign with a hashtag, and then you can like post about it, and then everyone in the world is a better person slightly because someone's doing something for someone else.
Oh, I love that. Not only did you come up with something, you come up with something and then figure out a strategy to create longevity and turn it into a movement so that it's not just that day. Oh, that is just so Jess Walker. Jess, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you, and I will see you soon. But for now, on air, I love you and goodbye.
Thank you so much. I love you. This has been so fun.
Peace.
Thanks. Yay!
Thank you so much for tuning into another installment of Unmapped. I really, really hope you enjoyed the episode. I always have a blast creating them, and it brings me so much joy to share them with you. As I said at the start, I'd really appreciate if you share, follow, and review the show if it feels right for you. I'd also like to thank my great mate Josh Ryan for the magic he makes in post-production, my studio partner Bondi Radio, and Arman at Moral Studios for the brand's design. I honestly could not do this by myself, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time, I'm Mike Kelly, and this has been Unmapped.